Alright, so here's video 4 of my build. I started tinkering, so I figured I better turn the camera on and show you guys what I was up to. This is going to be the axle build. I just received my RC4 drive gears in the mail today, so I think I have everything to build the axles now. So the first thing I was doing was working on the Vanquish top mount for the front. A lot of guys I know have put spacers in there to raise it up even more, so I just used 5 3mm washers on both the front and the rear, and as you can see I still have the stock cap head screws here. That's because I lengthened my screws. I just took some standard 3x16mm screws like this one here, and I cut them down to 10mm. I just used my Dremel and zipped them off, cut them down to 10mm because I measured the screw and it was just over 8, and then the washers were about 2, so I just ground them down to 10mm so that they would be plenty long enough to sink into the mount still and get lots of grip in there. I put some blue Loctite on them, some medium strength Loctite, and I screwed them in there. So it's a little bit higher than stock, but I know a few guys that have run this, and it seems to be better performing. So I started with that mod. The next thing is this bushing. This is a Traxxas bushing. I believe it's 8x5. I can't recall exactly. I'll post it in the description if I figure it out. But this goes in place of a bearing on the end of the main shaft. This is done mostly because that is the most failure prone bearing. It's the smallest, and after we upgrade our Vanquish kits it will definitely be the most failure prone and smallest. So I put a bushing in there. It doesn't increase drag much, and these motors are so slow and torquey that really it doesn't make any difference. All it does is give you the reliability of a single solid piece instead of the little tiny balls in a bearing that are going to explode and take your gears with it. So those are the first 2 steps that I did with that. I've also got my Vanquish plates, Vanquish gear cases. I'm going to do the front first, so I've got my C-hubs and my steering knuckles as well. So I also have my kit. I bought the Traxxas kit, or the Axial kit, the Xr10, mainly because really it was just a lot easier, probably cheaper in the long run, because all I'm going to use out of the kit is some hardware and the axle halves, and I can just sell the rest of the stuff. I can sell the stock wheels, the stock gears, the stock links, everything else that's in the kit, all the plastic stuff. So I think it'll end up being better that way. I know a bunch of people that run a lot of the stock parts, so I think I can sell it pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and build these axles. I might stop once in a while to put a little tidbit in here and there, but I'm going to fast forward it for you because this is it's been covered over and over and over again. So I might just add my little special touches, but for the most part it's been done, so you don't need to see it again and again and again. This won't be a one-day thing because I don't have time to do it right now, but you'll see it in the video. Alright, so I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to need out of the Axial kit. It's not going to be a lot, but I found in the plastics bag I found the axle halves, both for the front and the rear. Just put the rear off to the side because I'm doing that later. Bag B I pulled open. There's the axle shafts. I'm going to need those. And a bunch of screws, which I'm going to need some of them. I'm not sure what exactly yet, but I've still got to screw the axle halves together and put the links onto the axle halves and stuff like that. So I'm going to need a bit of the hardware. Some stuff I'm not going to need out of bag B are the gears. I will need some of the bearings for inside the axle housings, and for the main gear, because the RC4 drive ones don't come with any bearings, so I'll need all the bearings out of there most likely. I won't need the motor plate bearings because the Vanquish one comes with all the bearings, and same with the transmission case, it comes with the bearings as well, so I don't need those either out of the kit anyways. So the only thing in bag B that's really left is the steering setup, which is junk to begin with. I think it was a bad setup, but that's just my opinion. Too much slop in it. So I'm going to pull the bearings out of the gear set, and I got some miscellaneous hardware and go from there. Alright, so the first step worth noting is this screw. This little screw goes through your motor plate. I believe this way. Oh, this way. Goes through your motor plate and into your top link mount right there. Just like that. Now that's great. This screw fits great. It works. The problem is when you put in your RC four-wheel drive gears, they are not tapered like the stock gears. So it will rub on this screw if you don't modify the screw. Some people just drill out the plate a little bit and use a tapered screw, a flathead screw. I prefer to just modify this existing screw. You're going to have a gear that goes in here that's really large, that sits right against the plate more or less. And it, like I said, the RC four-wheel drive is not tapered. The tracks, or the stock one, is tapered. So what I do is I screw this screw all the way in until it's tight, and then I mark it with a marker. I just mark this edge that's going to be against the gear, and I'm just going to use my Dremel and just buzz that off. Just take off that entire side of the screw. You don't want to get to where the hex is, but you want to get close to it so that there's no interference with the gear, no binding, and it's nice and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so there it is. You can't really see it very well, but once I get it back in the motor plate, you'll be able to see it. I just ground the side of the head off so that when I put it back in the plate and into the link mount, ideally the spot that I ground off is going to be pointed towards that gear so that it won't bind up. So let's see how I did. So it looks pretty good. I don't know how well you can see that, or if you can at all. Right there maybe. But this side right here is ground down, so that's perfect. I'll just grab the gears and kind of show you how it is. So this is the gear that you're going to be using, and they may have tapered it a little bit now, but it's still not enough. So it's going to be sitting right about there, right against the plate, and now it's going to clear that screw no problem when it turns. So that's one important thing to know about the Vanquish plates and the RC four-wheel drive, that combination. I don't know if any of the other combinations need it, like the hot racing gears or the axial lightweight. I'm not familiar with those ones. The only ones I've used is the RC four-wheel drive because they work for me. They're a little bit loud. The tolerances aren't as pretty, but they work really well. They may have tightened up the tolerances since I originally got them, because in my other truck, I was one of the first people to get them, so I ordered them as soon as they came out. So I know there were some complaints about the tolerances, so they may have cleaned that up since. I'm hoping they have, but we'll see how it goes further on. So one of the things I didn't consider when I was putting this screw in, and I ended up stripping the screw, is this bearing. Because it's flanged, it sits just higher than the plate and just higher than the little rear, the little area that's it stands up a little bit for the screw so that it will clear that bearing, but that bearing just barely is above it, so it caught the edge that I had shaved off and ended up rounding out the screw. So I'm going to grab the screw from the other pack, from the other motor plate for the rear, and just use that, and I'll just have to I've got a bunch of 3mm hardware here. I'll just have to grab a 3x16 and cut it down for the rear for later. Another way you could do this to avoid what just happened to me with this screw rounding out, and it's the way I did it the first time, and I don't know why I didn't do it this time, but you can just put the screw right in there without this gear on and just Dremel it in place. Then you don't have to worry about it coming out. I actually have to pull it back out because I forgot to Loctite it, but you can just Dremel it in place. It's not a huge modification. As long as you're very careful, it won't be an issue at all. Well, my camera's saying the battery's dead, so I'll run it until the battery runs out tonight, and I'll come back to it another day. I've got another morning tomorrow anyway. At this point I would mention how much I hate E-clips, but I'm pretty sure that's a common feeling from all people. I'll just note as well, I'm just putting this together for demonstration purposes at this time. I will take it apart again and grease the bearings. I've just got this old gross can of bearing grease from when I had old vehicles that needed the bearings re-greased. It's just a standard multi-purpose vehicle wheel bearing grease. I've used that in all my builds and it works perfectly fine, and it was cheap, and I think I got it for free actually, so it works for me. I haven't seen any adverse effects from using it, and if it works in cars at a lot higher speeds than this, then it's gonna work for this. That's the way I see it anyways. Transmission's complete. I'm just gonna take it back apart now that I know that it's all good and it's turning somewhat. Grease it up and then put the axle together. Oh, I forgot one step that gonna have to stop for a second and do this. This is the bottom half of the axle, the steering slider. You want to cut that off. The easiest way is while with the axle apart, you just Dremel right against the case, right in there. This gives you a little more steering with the titanium link that I'm going to be using in the future. So as you can see, the steering link slider is gone. It's a really thin wall there. You can't really see very good on the video. It's a really thin wall, so make sure you don't go through it, because then you'll get contaminants inside the diff there, and we don't want that. So these are the Vanquish C-hubs that I got. Currently, they're not dependent on which side they go on. It doesn't matter which side they go on. You can put them on whichever side you want, as long as you keep the short arm to the top and the long arm to the bottom. But I'm going to be modifying them so I can clock them back. An extra spline on the axle housing, so then they will be side specific. Basically all you do is just grind a little bit extra on the notches, both top and bottom, so that it can clock back further. That's just how I like to run it. Okay, so that's the first one. It does take a little bit of work. I did a little bit of grinding, a little bit of drilling, a little bit of lots of things. There's no mathematical easy way to do it really. It's a kind of a difficult process. So as you can see, it's now clocked back one further than the hubs would normally allow. The bottom, you can't even see the hole, because I need to grind this one out on this side so that I can put it through about there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've got 4 more to do, or well, 3 more to do, this one and then the 2 for the other side. Like I said, make sure that it's directional. You want to make sure that it's directional, because now you only want to cut on one side of the hole. You don't want to compromise the strength too much by I ground a little bit there that I didn't intend to. But so for this side, I'm going to have to grind the front of the hole again, so they're not swappable now, because the extra spot would be on the back if you swap the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. So as you can see from the top here, this is the modified position and this is the stock position. It's pushed back quite a bit. You may not be able to see it, but it just gives you some more caster or camber. Either way, when you're turning. A lot of people think that it gives you a better grip on side hills when you're turning, and it gives you more side bite from your tire when you're turning. So it's all up to personal preference. Some people think it's great, some people think it's useless. You just have to figure out what works for you. This is what works for me, so I'm gonna run it like this. There's no reason I can't change it back later if I decide to, but it's a good option to have. Whether or not you use it is totally up to you. And so there's the steering hubs and C-knuckles on, and I put the steering knuckles on the wrong side, so I'm going to have to redo all that. Some thread locker. This is medium strength. Just got it from Hobby King. It was $1 for this. It came about half full. I bought 2 of them, poured them together, so it was right full for $2. It's worked fine for me. You want to use it anytime you're putting screws into aluminum. Plastic, it's okay, but if you're going metal into aluminum, you want to use thread locker. Otherwise, it can and will back out and ruin your day. And this is the servo mount post for the Vanquish top mount. I honestly wasn't sure how to install this because there's no instructions with it, so I left it till last. I'm still not sure I'm doing it right. I've got a 79 high-tech 7950 on the way, so I'm sure I'll have to adjust this anyways once that comes in, because like I said, I really am not sure how it's supposed to work. There's no instructions, and it's kind of a strange piece, so I'll just put it there for now, and then I know where it is later when I need it. There we go. That's about as far as I can do the axle now. I don't have my motors yet, I don't have my servo yet, and I don't have my chassis or my links or anything yet. I'm waiting on the titanium tie rod from Chaotic, as well as the chassis, the links, brood motors, and a high-tech 7950. Alright, so the front axle's done. I'm going to go ahead and do the rear axle. I'm not going to video it. It's basically the same process. The only exception being these little tiny spacers that go in right in these. There's little grooves for them. There's one at either end here of the center part of the axle. Those go in there. I'm not sure why. I think it's for the cutting brakes setup that never happened. Not that it bothers me, it's not comp legal, it's cutting brakes anyway, so I don't really care for it. But it's basically the same process, except for those, and then there's a support plate for that's supposed to be for the extra servo for the cutting brakes, but it's also used for structural support, so we still need to put it on there even though we're not using the cutting brake feature. So I'm just going to throw this together, and then I'll post a follow-up video, or grab a follow-up clip afterwards to put at the end. I'm not going to bother, like I said, not going to bother videoing it. It's basically the same process, just a whole lot easier because there's no steering components involved with it. Alright, so I lied. I am going to show one thing about the rear axles, because that's one of the things I'm taking off of my previous truck, is these seld-m-bend axles. They're a lot beefier than the stock axles. I've bent a bunch of the stock rear shafts, and so I'm going to throw these into my new build out of my old one, because I really don't need to buy new ones. There's no difference between whether they're slightly used or new. So what you have to do to modify the rear axle for these is, since they're thicker than the stock axles, you have to remove some of the material from inside the axle so that they'll fit through and not bind on anything. So what I did was measure the shafts on the seld-m-bends, and they came to, in millimeters, 5.9 millimeters. So I use this drill bit, which it measures 6.3 millimeters, and it is a 1/4 inch drill bit. And the easiest way that I've found to clear out that material to make room for the bigger axles is just to throw this on a drill, take the two axle cases for the rear, and find the hardware. So I'll do that. I gotta find the hardware, and then I'm just gonna put in a couple of screws here and this one, and I'll show you once I'm at that point. I'll stop it again and show you what I'm doing. Okay, so the axle is stuck together, just these two screws in this one. It's still fairly flexible on the ends, which is fine. So all I do is I just take my drill, put it inside the axle, and let it go. And just squeeze the axle together so that it puts resistance on it and the material gets drilled out of there. Run it through a few times on that side, flip it over and go a few more on this side. And that should give us enough clearance for the seld-m-bends. That's what I did on my previous build and it worked great. I can't guarantee that that's the size of the drill bit I used, but it's a half a millimeter larger than it needs to be, so it should be more than sufficient. And I'm just trying to crack this open again so you can see what it did in there. It basically just cleared out these little X's. They're little cross brace X's. I'm not sure the point of them, maybe just for strength, but it just cleared them down a little bit. And same with some of the screw holes. Same with the top half here. Cleared down those X's, the screw holes. Just clean that out so that you don't have any foreign stuff floating around in there, potentially binding your axles. But yeah, that worked for me last time. I have no reason to think that it wouldn't work this time. That's just my way of doing it, quick and easy. I'm going to go ahead and put that together, the axles now. Like I said, I'm not going to put the shafts in because I'm going to put the seld-m-bends in there. I'm just going to leave them in my current truck until this build is nearly complete. So I'm not going to put the axles in there, but it's pretty straightforward build, just like the front axle. So like I said, I'm not going to video it. I think you guys kind of get the point of putting together axles now. Okay, so here we are. The front and rear axles are both complete. Like I said, the rear axle assembly was pretty similar to the front axle assembly. I did throw the stock shafts in there just for mock-up purposes because I don't want to pull them out of my current truck until the build is totally complete. But the axles are done now, so that's the speed control's done, the shock's done, the axle's done. Quite a bit more work to do, still waiting on a whole bunch of stuff, motor, servo, the chassis links, steering link. I'm sure there's more, I just can't think of it right now. Oh yeah, foams for the tires and wheels as well. I've got the tires and the wheels, I'm just waiting for the foams. But yeah, pretty much the most of it's done now anyways, the majority of it, just a lot just waiting now. Time to play the waiting game. So that's video 4. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Some binding in there. I think that's just Loctite, it'll work its way out. So hope you enjoyed it, and hope you can find something useful in it. Thanks.